Today we're going to talk about serializing objects, and that just means basically writing these objects to a file or reading them from a file. And what I'm going to talk about today doesn't only apply to dictionaries, it applies to any object. So for example, let's say I have a file. So let me create a file on my desktop, test.txt, and it has the names of my students. Okay, so I have Minnie, Mickey, Donald, and Sleepy. So these are my students in my class, and I want to read these students into my program. So let's review how we do that. So let's say FN, for example. We're going to say open, and my file is on the desktop, so it's in C users, my username, desktop, test.txt. Reading, and we always need to make sure we close the file, right? And so what we learned was that we could say for every line in the file, for example, I want to add it to a list. So let's create a list at the beginning. Let's say students, and it's an empty list. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to students. I'm going to append line. And let's just make sure that everything is right. So let's print our students list to make sure it's correct. And now I find that they're there. Okay, well, we forgot to remove the new line. So let me strip that first. Let's try one more time. Okay, so now I have my students. I guess I have an empty line in the file. One more time. Okay, so now I have a list. Now let's say, this list, what I wanted to do is I want to, do something else to it. So I'm going to say append dopey to it, and append, sorry, not FN, students. We want to append to the list. So students.append dopey and students.append Daisy. Okay. And now I want to write it back to a file. So instead of using a for loop to write to a file again or read from a file, what we can do is use serialization. So what we do is, the first thing we do is we need to import a module called pickle. Okay, so pickle is a module that is used to help write objects and read objects from a file. So the first thing is I'm going to import pickle. So let's do that. I'm going to come here and say import pickle. The next thing is, if I want to write a list students to a binary file, I'm going to show you what the difference between them is in a second. What we want to do is we want to open a binary file for writing. Instead of using the W flag, we're going to use the WB flag. W means I'm going to write. B means it's binary. I'm asking you to write me an object. Let's just see what that's going to do. So the first thing is I'm going to say, let's say f out equal to open. And I'm going to open another file, not test.txt. So I'm going to open another file, and I'm going to call it binary.txt. Open it for writing, but writing in binary. Okay, and we always have to make sure we close our file. So I closed it. Okay, so now I opened the file for writing. I want to write to it. So instead of using a for loop to say for every item in the list to write it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pickle.dump. So the pickle, the module that I imported, has a dump method. Sorry, a dump function. And what you do is you give it the file and the object. So you give it the object first and the file. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to say pickle.dump. I want you to dump students into fout. Okay, so all this does is basically say dump or write to fout, to that file that I created with WB permission, writing binary. Okay, so let's run this code and see what's going to happen. So nothing got printed, but if I go on my desktop, I should find a file called binary.txt. And let's search for it. There it is. And I can't really read it. You know, I see Minnie, Mickey, Donald, but you see like there are other things around it. So this really is not meant for me to be writing to it. It's supposed to be a binary file. And so using a .text as my extension is not really the best thing. Binary files usually have a .dat extension to indicate that those are binary. They're not meant for you human beings to read. They are meant for programs to read. Okay, well, how can I read this file? Well, what you do is you do the opposite of writing. So writing, you open the file with WB and you use a function called dump. Well, when you want to read in, what you're doing is unpickling. So pickling is kind of like, you know, putting things together. Unpickling is taking them out. So to unpickle, to get back those objects that we wrote to the file, again, we're going to import pickle, which we already did. And now we want to open the file for reading because we want to see what we wrote to the file. And so I'm going to open it for reading with the R flag and B for binary. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. So I want to read the list back from the file. So I'm going to say, let's say fn again equal to open. This is my file. I'm going to say it's binary.dat because that's the file. And I want to open it with reading binary. Okay. Now I'm opening it for reading and I need to make sure I also close it. But now instead of using the dump, I'm going to use the load. So now I'm loading data from a file. I'm going to use the load function. I'm going to give it the file I want to load from, and it's going to give me back the item or the object. And so here I'm going to say, let's say new list equal to pickle.load. I want you to load whatever is in this file. And let's print out what we just loaded. So let's see if we were able to read in what we wrote out earlier on. And we find that it did. It loaded everything, including the 2 that we appended to the list earlier on. Okay, so this is a nice way to just read an entire dictionary or entire anything, a list from a file. So for example, here, let's do a dictionary example. So let's say I have a dictionary here and it has the names of people like we did before and their favorite colors. So black, and Mickey, let's say, was brown, and Daisy was green. Okay. This is a dictionary, so I need to use the curly braces, and I want to write it out to another file. So I'm going to say f, let's say out equal to open, and let's say dict binary .dat. And I'm going to write it out. So I'm going to say WB to write it out. And I'm going to go to pickle and say I want you to dump my dict into f out. And let's close f out. Now I want to see if I wrote it right. So I'm going to try reading it in. So I'm going to say fn equal to open. It was called, what did we call it? Dict binary. Dict binary .dat. This time I want to read it in binary. And so I'm going to print out what it gives me back. So I'm going to go to pickle and say I want you to load from fn. And whatever it loads, I'm just printing it. I'm not saving it for any reason. And I'm just going to close the file when I'm done. Let's see if I'm able to see that dictionary that I wrote to the file. And I have a syntax error. Let's see, where is my syntax error? There we go. It's supposed to be a colon. Let's try one more time. And it was able to read in the dictionary. So here I created a dictionary. I wrote it out to my binary file, and then I closed it. And then I opened that file later for reading binary, and I was able to get the contents of it. So it's a really nice way. Instead of having to write a for loop to read and write content, you can just use the pickle interface to do that for you. So you'll see in the slides an example. I'm not going to type it with you, but we'll go through and explain it. So here what we want to do is we want to write a program that asks the user for all family member information. So we're going to ask the user for each person's name, age, and weight. And so every person, they have a name, an age, and a weight. And so I want to save that somehow. So the first thing is, how do you think we should store this information? Here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write, I'm opening up a file, info.dat, for writing. And what I'm doing, because I don't know how many people the user is going to ask for, is going to enter information for, I'm going to have a while loop that runs as long as they say y. So I start off again with y, lowercase y, and as long as it's lowercase y, I go and I say, you know, get me the data, and then I ask them again, do you want to enter another one? And if they say yes, it's going to keep looping around. So here I'm trying to break the code up into different functions so it's not messy. So the purpose of this main is basically just to keep looping around asking for more information. Now, where is the information being saved? It is being saved in the save data. So what save data is doing, it's creating a dictionary for every person. And it's saving them, it's having keys, name, age, and weight are my keys. And here it's asking the user to input. So the user enters their name. It says, enter your name. The user is going to enter Minnie. It's going to take that as Minnie and save it in the dictionary under the key name. So if I want anyone's name, I just use the key name. And it's going to do the same for the age and the weight. And so now I have a dictionary for this person with 3 keys, name, age, and weight. Name is pointing to their name, age is pointing to the int value of their name, and weight is pointing to their weight. And then I have this dictionary and I go and I say, write it to that file. So that info.dat got passed into save data. And so I am dumping this dictionary to the file. Now, how many dictionaries am I going to dump into this file? As many as the user has people. So if this user runs this code 5 times because they have 5 people living in their family, I'm going to have 5 dictionaries dumped into the code, into the file. Now, this I didn't show you. How do you read several items from the dictionary, from the pickled file? So in the example I showed you, my file here, I only dumped 1 item. I didn't dump more than 1 item. If I wanted to dump more than 1 item, I can do like pickle.dump like another time. So our code here, the example I'm showing you here, is dumping many dictionaries. Now, how do you read all those dictionaries? Well, basically when you try to read from a pickled file using the load, it's going to give you whatever it was able to read. So it's going to give you the item that was pickled, that you dumped. So if you dumped 3 items, it's going to give you the first item, then it's going to give you the second item, then it's going to give you the third item. And if you try to request to load more, what it's going to do, it's going to throw out an error saying end of file error. I've reached the end of my file and there is nothing else for me to read. And so what we can do is we can add a try except. We try to load the data. And if an exception happens, we're going to set a flag to indicate that we're done. So here I'm setting a flag, end of file is false. And so as long as not end of file, so as long as I have not reached the end of the file, so as long as this is not true, this code is going to keep running because not false is going to be true. So while true, it's going to try loading and then it's going to keep doing that until the code finishes loading all the data. And then you try asking and it says, oh, I'm done. No more data for me to give you. So it's going to set the end of file to true. And so this is going to cause this while loop to exit. And so here, what we do is we load the person's data, which was a dictionary, and we're calling a display data function on it, and then we can display it. So we know that the person's name was saved in the name key, age was saved with the age, and weight was saved with age. I'm not going to give you anything as complicated as this to save more than one piece of data in a binary file, but I just wanted to show it to you as an example. So as long as you can do something like this, that'll be fine. And so for today's classwork, what you're going to do is you're going to ask the user for information about courses they have taken so far. And for each course, it should ask for the course name, number, and letter grade received. So instead of, you can use follow this example, or what you can do is you can create a list of dictionaries. So here, let's imagine that, you're going to have your student dictionary. And let's say the user has entered. So here I have the course name, for their course name, number, and letter grade. So let's say they said they took math and they got an A, and they took physics and they got a B, and they took English and they got an A minus. Okay. Sorry. So as you're asking them for the course, so there are more than one piece of information, the course name, number, and letter grade. So let's do that again. So instead, what you can do is you can say, let's say, a class. Class A was the first one you read in, and it had the name of the course was math, and what's else? The number was 172, and the grade was an A. So let's say you're creating a while loop, just like the program had. While the user is entering information, you're going to keep creating these dictionaries for each one. So I'm just going to manually create a couple dictionaries to show you what you can do. So the next dictionary again has the name as physics, for example, and the number as 101, and the grade as a B. Let's put a B in quotes. Now, what the example did in the slides was it dumped the first dictionary into the file, and then it dumped the second dictionary into the file. But what you can do is you can just put them in a list. So you can have a list of the dictionaries that the user had, okay? And then you can dump this to the file. So now you're dumping only one thing. What are you dumping? You're dumping a list. This list, yes, internally contains dictionaries, but it's still one thing. So you only now have to just go to your file the classes binary, open it up for writing, and then you just have to say pickle.dump student dict into your file. And that'll actually write the list of dictionaries to the file. So if I try to open this file later for reading, so if I come here and say, and let's paste it. And this time I'm reading binary. Okay. And I'm just going to print what I read from the dictionary, from the file. So I'm going to go to pickle and I'm going to say load from FN. And I have a syntax error. Let's go to syntax error on line 36. Oh, yep, this should be a colon. One more time. Okay, and so what did it give me back? It gave me back a list, because that's what I gave it. I gave it a list that contained two items. The first item was the first dictionary, and the second item was the second dictionary. So when you're dumping, here I only had to dump one thing, which was the list of dictionaries, and I only had to load one thing. So it's a little easier than the code here, where it's dumping one at a time. So it's dumping multiple dictionaries. See, it's calling the dump method on every dictionary in save data, and save data is inside of a while loop. So if the user said 5 times to save the data, you're creating 5 dictionaries and you're dumping one at a time. What I did in my code, instead of dumping each dictionary at a time, was I said, I'm going to put them in a list. And so you can use my example here of just creating one list of all the dictionaries and dumping that, or you can follow the example that is in the slides to do the classwork. Both will work. You're not going to be able to test this on HackerRank. So what I want you to do is submit your code and also submit screenshots of running the code that reads in the file, writes the data to the file, that's asking the user and writing to the file, and then also reading in from the file.